Most of the founders I work with don't come from the cigar industry. They don't have a warehouse full of aged tobacco, or a factory in Nicaragua, or a grandfather who rolled cigars by hand. What they have is a story, something personal, something earned, something they've been carrying around for years, waiting for permission to tell it. And the thing I've learned, after helping over 100 brands go from concept to shelf, is that the story is almost always enough. The question is whether the founder believes that before they start. I want to tell you about a founder I'll call Maria, a name I'm using for someone whose story I've seen play out, in different forms, dozens of times. Her details are specific to her, but the arc she followed, the dream, the doubt, the turning point, and the launch, that arc belongs to almost every founder I've ever worked with, including maybe you. This is her story. And at the end, I want to tell you what it means for yours. Section 1. The Dream. Maria's father grew up in a tobacco-growing region, a place where the land and the crop and the craft were interwoven into daily life in a way that people who grow up in cities rarely experience. He talked about it his whole life: the smell of curing leaves, the weight of a hand-rolled cigar, the quiet pride of work done carefully, over time, without shortcuts. He never built a brand, but he gave Maria something more durable than a business plan. He gave her a reason. Maria spent years in hospitality, restaurants, hotels, events, developing an intuition for what makes an experience feel premium. Why some rooms feel expensive before you've looked at the price. Why some brands feel worth trusting before you've tried the product. She didn't have a word for it at the time. Years later, when she started learning about brand design, she realized she'd been studying it her whole career without knowing it. The idea came the way most honest brand ideas come. Not as a business opportunity, but as something that felt unfinished. A story that hadn't been told. A legacy that was in danger of being forgotten. She wanted to build something her father would have recognized. Something that carried the weight of what he loved, in a form that the people who appreciate great cigars would be able to hold in their hands. Section 2. The Doubt. The doubt started almost immediately, and it didn't come from inside her. It came from people around her who thought they were being helpful. The premium cigar market is established, they said. The big names have been around for decades. You don't have the connections. You don't have the manufacturing relationships. You don't have the capital. You don't have the experience. You don't have any of the things that people who succeed in this industry have. What's interesting about doubt, especially the kind that comes wrapped in practical advice, is that it's very hard to argue with, because the people saying these things aren't wrong exactly. The market is established. The names are entrenched. The barriers are real. Doubt is most effective when it's partially true. And so Maria did what most founders do at this stage. She almost believed it. She spent almost a year in that almost, researching the industry, taking notes, running numbers, and circling back to the same question. Is there actually room for a new brand here? And the longer she sat with the question, the more she realized she was asking it wrong. The question wasn't whether there was room. The question was whether she had something worth saying. That shift didn't happen all at once. It happened in a conversation. Section 3. The Turning Point. When Maria first reached out to us, she wasn't sure she was ready to start. She said something in our first conversation that I've heard in different words from so many founders. I'm not a designer. I don't know what I want it to look like. I just know what I want people to feel when they hold it. And I told her, that's the most useful thing you could have said. That feeling is where every great brand starts. The design is how we translate it. What changed for her in that conversation wasn't that she suddenly had a business plan or a manufacturer or a budget. What changed was her understanding of what packaging actually does. She'd always thought of it as decoration, something you added at the end after the real work was done. But great packaging isn't decoration. It's communication. It tells a story before the box is even opened, before the band is read, before the cigar is lit. The packaging is the first chapter. And once she understood that, the doubt reframed itself. She wasn't an outsider trying to break into an established industry. She was a storyteller with a story the industry didn't have yet. Her father's region, her family's relationship to the land, a perspective on the craft that belonged entirely to her. The packaging wasn't going to be the hard part. It was going to be the proof. She went home from that conversation and wrote 3 pages of notes, not about design, about what she wanted people to feel, the weight of tradition without heaviness, the warmth of a family story without sentimentality, the confidence of a premium product without arrogance. 3 pages of feeling. That's what we designed from. Section 4. The build. The build took 8 months from that first conversation to finished product. And it was not a straight line. There were rounds of design that felt right and then didn't. There were print proofs that revealed problems we had to solve before going back to press. There were moments where the budget felt tighter than the vision, and decisions had to be made about where to invest and where to simplify. What Maria never lost was the clarity about the feeling. When something came back from the printer and it didn't feel right, she could say exactly why. Not in technical terms, in emotional terms. This doesn't feel like my father's story. This feels generic. This feels like it's trying too hard. That emotional clarity was the North Star that guided every revision, and it's the reason the final product had integrity. The primary band went through 6 iterations. The box color was reconsidered twice after seeing physical proofs. The secondary band, the footer, was the last thing locked because it had to carry a piece of Spanish text from her father's region that needed to be legible at a very small scale without losing its elegance. That one element took 3 rounds of typographic adjustment to get right. 8 months later, she had a brand, not a logo on a box, a brand, with a story built into every surface, every finish, every typographic decision. Something that communicated who she was and where she came from before a single word of marketing had been written. The packaging was the first chapter, and it was a good one. Section 5. The launch and what it means. Maria's brand launched with placement in 3 cigar lounges in the first quarter. She has a second line in development. The doubt is still there sometimes. She told me recently that it never completely goes away. But she's learned to treat it differently. Not as evidence that she doesn't belong, but as evidence that she cares enough to keep raising the bar. The doubt no longer has a vote. The brand does. I tell you Maria's story not because it's exceptional. It's actually very representative of what I see when founders commit to the process. I tell it because the version of this story that ends before the launch is far more common. The founder who almost started, who did the research and ran the numbers and let the doubt cast the deciding vote. And I want you, if you're sitting with a story you haven't told yet, to understand that the doubt is not information. It's weather. It passes. If you're in the early stages of building your cigar brand and you want to talk about what that process looks like, the link to start a project with us is in the description. And if you got value out of this video, subscribe. Every week I post content for founders who are building something worth building. The next video is linked right here. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.